May 1941. The Royal Navy faced an impossible problem. Somewhere in the vast North Atlantic, Nazi Germany's newest, most powerful battleship was loose. Racing toward Britain's vital lifeline, the Atlantic convoys. The only aircraft available to stop her looked like they belonged in a museum. This is the story of how an obsolete biplane, a relic from another era, took on the most advanced warship of its time, and won. The battleship Bismarck was a monster. 50,000 tons of steel, armor, and firepower. She was the absolute pride of the German Kriegsmarine. Launched in Hamburg, she embodied the pinnacle of naval engineering. Her 8 massive 15-inch guns could obliterate targets from over 20 miles away. Her main armor belt was 13 inches thick, but her real advantage was a fire control system so sophisticated it could maintain pinpoint accuracy even in the violent seas of the North Atlantic, a feat that left other battleships struggling to hit anything at all. German propaganda relentlessly called her unsinkable. And after she famously destroyed the British battlecruiser HMS Hood in a matter of minutes, very few in the Royal Navy were inclined to argue the Hood, the pride of the British fleet, was gone. Panic was setting in. So what did Britain have to throw at this seemingly invincible juggernaut? This. The Fairey Swordfish, a torpedo bomber that looked like it had flown straight out of World War I. Its fuselage was fabric stretched over a metal frame. Its landing gear was fixed in place, permanently down. Its cockpits were open to the elements, meaning crews would freeze solid over the icy Atlantic. Its top speed may be 138 miles per hour on a good day with a strong tailwind, and if the pilot was feeling optimistic. Now picture this flying anachronism heading toward the Bismarck. The German battleship was bristling with anti-aircraft guns, 16 heavy 105mm cannons, 16 37mm guns, and another 12 20mm guns, a wall of flak. Every military analyst who looked at this matchup came to the same horrifying conclusion. Sending Swordfish against the Bismarck was a suicide mission. Modern fighters of the era, like the German Bf 109, could fly 3 times faster. Even some warships could outrun the Swordfish at full steam. And the worst part, torpedo attacks demand incredible precision. Pilots had to fly at a terrifyingly low 50 feet, maintain a steady speed of just over 100 miles per hour, and release their torpedo from less than 1,000 yards away, point-blank range. This gave Bismarck's gunners all the time in the world to pick them off, one by one. On paper, it was absurd. The Bismarck was cutting-edge 1939 technology. The Swordfish was a product of 1933 budget cuts. Yet this slow, fragile, outdated biplane had a secret: its obsolescence. The very thing that made it look so pathetic was actually its greatest advantage. To understand why, you have to look beyond the specifications. Let us be honest. The Swordfish was still flying in 1941 because Britain couldn't afford to replace it. When the first planes entered service in 1936, they were already considered old-fashioned, but the Admiralty was trying to rebuild the entire Royal Navy on a shoestring budget. A reliable, simple biplane that was cheap to build was the best they could get. When the war started, the intended replacement, the Fairey Albacore, turned out to be only a marginal improvement. It was more complex to maintain and slower to produce, with German U-boats sinking ships faster than Britain could build them. The Admiralty made a crucial decision. They prioritized numbers over sophistication. So, production of the old swordfish, affectionately nicknamed the stringbag, continued. And as the war went on, crews discovered its unexpected strengths. First, that fabric construction made repairs incredibly fast. Bullet holes weren't a disaster. They could be patched up with doped fabric in just a few hours. Second, its huge biplane wings gave it immense lift. A swordfish could take off and fly safely in terrible weather that kept more modern high-performance monoplanes grounded. Third, that clunky fixed landing gear actually acted like a keel, giving the plane incredible stability. This was perfect for the low, slow, steady torpedo runs that faster, twitchier monoplanes struggled with, and finally, that miserable open cockpit. It was cold, it was brutal, but it gave the crew unmatched visibility. The observer could see everything: flak patterns, enemy fighters, the timing of the waves with total clarity. None of this was by design. It was just the result of building the cheapest, simplest plane possible back in 1933. But by 1941, the Fleet Air Arm had hundreds of crews who knew exactly how to exploit every one of these strange quirks. What no one, not even the British, could have predicted was how these very quirks would directly counter the Bismarck's advanced, state-of-the-art gunnery systems. The German fire control was designed to calculate the speed and altitude of fast-moving modern aircraft. It predicted where a target would be in a few seconds and aimed the guns there. But when the swordfish lumbered in, they were flying so incredibly slow that the German predictors couldn't cope. The system was too advanced. It was programmed for threats moving at 200-300 miles per hour, not a biplane puttering along at barely 100. The shells were exploding far in front of the planes, where the computers thought they should be. The swordfish were literally flying under the radar of the most sophisticated anti-aircraft system in the world. As the German gunners manually tried to adjust their aim, they ran into another problem. At such close range, they couldn't depress their heavy 105mm guns low enough to hit the planes skimming the waves. The swordfish were too close, too low, and too slow. It was a technological mismatch in reverse. The Germans had brought a high-tech sniper rifle to a knife fight happening at their feet. The attack on the evening of May 26, 1941, was launched in horrendous weather. Gale-force winds whipped the sea into a frenzy. Only the swordfish could have even taken off from the carrier HMS Ark Royal in those conditions. 15 planes took to the stormy skies. They found the Bismarck ploughing through the heavy seas. They came in low, a swarm of anachronisms against a titan of steel. Flak erupted from the battleship, but it was inaccurate. The slow speed of the biplanes was confusing the predictors. The crews, braving the storm and the gunfire in their open cockpits, pressed their attack. They flew through a hailstorm of tracers, lining up their shots. Torpedo after torpedo dropped into the churning water. Most missed or hit the thick armoured belt, doing no real damage. It seemed the attack was a failure, but then 2 torpedoes found their mark in the one place the Bismarck was vulnerable. One hit amidships, causing minor flooding. But the other, the fateful one, struck the stern. It didn't sink the ship. It did something far worse. The explosion buckled the Bismarck's massive rudders, jamming them hard to port. The pride of the German Navy was now trapped, unable to steer, turning in endless circles in the middle of the Atlantic. She was a sitting duck. The next morning, the British home fleet closed in. The battleships King George V and Rodney pounded the crippled Bismarck with their heavy guns. With her steering gone, she couldn't manoeuvre. She couldn't escape. Her incredible firepower was rendered useless. After a relentless bombardment, she was a burning, shattered wreck. Finally, scuttling charges were detonated by her own crew, and the unsinkable Bismarck slipped beneath the waves. The slow, fragile and obsolete fairy Swordfish had achieved the impossible. It hadn't sunk the Bismarck on its own, but it had delivered the crippling blow that sealed her fate. It proved that in warfare, the most advanced technology isn't always the winner. Sometimes the advantage goes to the one who is underestimated, the one with unexpected strengths, the one that simply refuses to fit the mold. The string bag was a relic, but on that stormy day in May 1941, it was the most effective weapon in the world. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. History often paints a picture of unstoppable technological progress, where the newest, fastest, and strongest weapon always wins. But in May 1941, in the storm-tossed North Atlantic, the most advanced battleship in the world was brought to its knees by an aircraft that looked like a relic from a museum. This is the story of how the German battleship Bismarck, a symbol of naval power, was hunted down and crippled by a handful of fabric-covered biplanes, the fairy Swordfish. It's a tale of David versus Goliath, where outdated technology became an unexpected and lethal form of stealth. The story begins in the cold waters of the Denmark Strait. On May 24, 1941, the brand-new Bismarck, alongside the heavy cruiser Prince Eugene, encountered the pride of the Royal Navy, the battlecruiser HMS Hood and the battleship HMS Prince of Wales. In a stunningly brief and brutal exchange, Bismarck's guns found their mark. Just 6 minutes into the battle, HMS Hood erupted in a catastrophic explosion, breaking in two and sinking in less than 3 minutes. Of her crew of 1,418 men, only 3 survived. The loss of the Hood sent a shockwave through the British Admiralty. The most powerful warship in the Royal Navy had been annihilated, but the engagement wasn't a total loss for the British. Prince of Wales, despite her own technical issues, managed to land 3 crucial hits on Bismarck. One of these shells ruptured a fuel tank, forcing Bismarck to leak precious oil and reduce her speed. Her mission to raid Atlantic shipping lanes was now compromised. She had to run for the safety of a friendly port in occupied France. Then she vanished. Taking advantage of a rain squall on May 25th, Bismarck slipped away from her pursuers. For 31 agonizing hours, the hunters had lost their prey. The Atlantic Ocean is vast, and the Bismarck could be anywhere. The fear in London was palpable. If she reached the coast of France, she would fall under the protective umbrella of the Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, making her virtually untouchable. The entire Royal Navy was now on a desperate, frantic search. The breakthrough came at 10:30 in the morning on May 26th. A lone Catalina flying boat on the very edge of its patrol range spotted the German Leviathan. The Bismarck was 700 miles from the French port of Brest, steaming towards safety. The window to stop her was closing, and fast. The only British naval force in a position to launch an immediate air attack was the new aircraft carrier HMS Victorious. But the Victorious was barely battle-ready. Many of her crew were still learning their roles, still unfamiliar with their aircraft. Yet they were the only hope. That night, 9 Swordfish torpedo bombers took off from her deck, flying into worsening weather. They found the Bismarck and pressed their attack with incredible bravery through a wall of anti-aircraft fire. One torpedo found its target. In a moment that was both humiliating and terrifyingly dangerous, the attack was a complete failure. Every single magnetic torpedo malfunctioned in the heavy seas, either detonating prematurely or not at all. But now the Germans knew the Swordfish were nearby. The element of surprise was gone. There was only enough daylight for one last desperate attempt. Aboard Ark Royal, the ground crews worked frantically. They rearmed the Swordfish, this time with older, more reliable contact detonators that would explode on impact. At 7:10 p.m., 15 Swordfish took off again, launching into weather so violent it was almost suicidal. They flew into a world of driving rain squalls, 50-foot swells, and wind gusts that threatened to tear their fragile biplanes apart. Visibility was often zero. At 7:40 p.m., a young pilot, Sub-Lieutenant John Moffat, peered through the gloom and saw it, a fast-moving grey silhouette. The Bismarck, her guns were already turning, tracking the incoming attackers. The German gunners were ready, and the sky exploded with a storm of flak, far more intense than anything the pilots had faced before. The Swordfish squadron leader, Eugene Esmond, split his formation, sending them in from multiple directions to divide the ship's fire and create a complex web of torpedo tracks. The pilots dropped their planes down to just 50 feet, skimming the tops of the massive waves. Some flew so low that sea spray completely covered their windscreens, forcing them to fly blind for terrifying seconds. At a range of just 400 yards, John Moffat released his torpedo. Other pilots dropped theirs from 800 yards. The Bismarck's captain desperately tried to comb the tracks, turning his ship to present the narrowest possible profile to the incoming torpedoes. But with so many coming from different angles, he couldn't dodge them all. 2 torpedoes hit. The first struck amidships, causing some flooding but no critical damage. The second torpedo, however, delivered the fatal blow. It struck the Bismarck's stern, jamming her rudders hard to port. The mighty battleship was now trapped in a relentless turn, unable to steer, a prisoner of the very storm that had protected her. She was a sitting duck. So how did this happen? How did an obsolete biplane succeed where modern battleships and brand new torpedoes had failed? The answer lies in a fascinating paradox. The Swordfish was so outdated it was effectively invisible to Bismarck's advanced defences. Bismarck's anti-aircraft system relied on sophisticated mechanical predictors. The predictors were literally programmed to believe that no modern aircraft could fly that slow. Even when German operators tried to manually override the system, it fought them. And it wasn't just the speed. The Swordfish's construction worked in its favour. Its fabric-covered wings gave off a faint, inconsistent radar return, making it much harder to track than an all-metal aircraft. At night or in low light, the fabric skin didn't reflect searchlights or the glare of tracer fire like polished aluminum would. To top it all off, the Bismarck's own fire control computers required a stable platform to work correctly. The heaving, violent Atlantic Ocean provided the exact opposite. The Swordfish wasn't a stealth aircraft in the modern sense. It was stealth through anachronism. Its very obsolescence was its greatest weapon. It behaved so differently from what Bismarck's state-of-the-art defences were designed to fight that the system simply broke down. And that weakness, that fatal flaw, only had to be exploited once. The torpedo that jammed Bismarck's rudder sealed her fate. The next morning, surrounded by the guns of the British Home Fleet, the pride of the German Navy was shelled into a burning wreck and finally sank, taking over 2,100 men with her. The story of the Bismarck and the Swordfish is a powerful reminder that in warfare, the most advanced technology isn't always the most effective. Sometimes innovation comes not from looking forward, but from an unexpected weakness exploited by the past. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this piece of history, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. The fate of the Bismarck hung in the balance. There was time for one more strike. Torpedoes were reloaded, this time fitted with contact detonators, a crucial change. At 7:10 in the evening, 15 Fairey Swordfish biplanes launched from the deck of HMS Ark Royal. The weather was beyond atrocious. It was suicidal. Driving rain squalls, 50-foot swells that dwarfed the tiny aircraft, and violent wind gusts that threatened to flip a biplane over in an instant. Visibility would drop to zero without any warning. This was the environment they were flying into, searching for the most powerful battleship in the world. 20 minutes after launch, Sub-Lieutenant John Moffat caught sight of her, a massive grey silhouette, moving fast, her guns already swinging towards them. The Germans were ready and waiting. The anti-aircraft fire, the flak, was a storm of explosions, even worse than what the pilots had faced at the formation leader, Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond, gave the signal to split the formation. They would attack from multiple directions, creating multiple torpedo tracks for the Bismarck to deal with. The Swordfish dropped down perilously low to just 50 feet above the churning sea. They skimmed the tops of the massive waves, sometimes dipping into the troughs so deep that salt spray completely blinded their windscreens. Imagine flying a fabric-covered biplane in a hurricane with shells exploding all around you. At 400 yards, a near-suicidal range, Moffat released his torpedo. Others launched from 800 yards. The Bismarck's captain desperately tried to comb the tracks, turning the ship to present its narrowest profile to the incoming torpedoes. But with so many coming from different angles, she couldn't dodge them all. 2 hits were confirmed. The first struck the ship amidships. It caused some flooding, but wasn't a critical blow. The second hit, however, would change the course of the war. At around 9:15 that night, a single torpedo, most likely from the aircraft of either Sub-Lieutenant Moffat or Sub-Lieutenant Tony Beale, slammed into the Bismarck's stern, just ahead of the port rudder. The explosion was devastating. It buckled the thick steel plating, shattered the internal frames, and, most critically, jammed the port rudder hard over at a 15-degree angle. The blast also damaged the starboard rudder and flooded the entire steering compartment, severing all control linkages. The crew scrambled to fix the damage. Emergency steering systems failed. Auxiliary backups failed. The seas were so violent that sending divers down to try and manually unjam the rudders was impossible. The mighty Bismarck, the pride of the German Navy, was now trapped. Unable to steer, she began turning in helpless, wide circles. She was doomed. Admiral Gunther Lütjens, the fleet commander aboard the Bismarck, knew it was over. He sent a final fateful radio message to Berlin, ship unmaneuverable, expecting enemy contact at dawn. That message was intercepted by the British. The trap was closing. As dawn broke on May 27th, the British battleships HMS King George V and HMS Rodney found the crippled German giant. The Bismarck's crew fought with incredible bravery. Her gunners remained at their stations until the very end, firing back even as their ship was being torn apart. But she couldn't maneuver. She couldn't evade. There was no escape. For nearly 2 hours, the British battleships pounded the Bismarck with their massive guns. She became a burning, shattered ruin. Finally, the destroyer HMS Dorsetshire moved in and fired the final torpedoes. At 10:40 in the morning, the Bismarck rolled over, her flag still flying, and sank beneath the waves. Of her crew of over 2,200 men, only 115 survived. The Swordfish crews made their way back to the Ark Royal. Their fragile biplanes were riddled with holes, the fabric wings patched up with simple dope and tape. For these pilots, it was just another mission, another day at the office. But for the British Admiralty, it was a stunning revelation. A slow, obsolete-looking biplane, designed on a shoestring budget back in 1933, had just been the key instrument in sinking the most feared and powerful battleship afloat. It wasn't about speed. The Swordfish was slower than the Bismarck's top speed. It wasn't about advanced technology or heavy armor. It was about the perfect, audacious use of an outdated weapon in the perfect set of circumstances by incredibly brave men. And the thing is, the Swordfish had done something like this before. On November 11th, 1940, in a daring night raid on the Italian naval base at Taranto, 21 Swordfish from HMS Illustrious crippled half the Italian battle fleet at anchor. That attack provided a blueprint, a proof of concept that naval air power could devastate a fleet of battleships. A blueprint that the Japanese would study very, very carefully. 13 months later, that same blueprint would be used at Pearl Harbor, though with far more modern and capable aircraft. But the principle, the very idea, had been proven by the stringbag, the affectionate nickname for the biplane the Royal Navy could never quite afford to replace. The fairy swordfish, slow, outdated, and fragile, had earned its place in history as one of the most effective and important naval strike aircraft ever to fly. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes it's not the tool that matters, but the skill and courage of the hands that wield it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more tales from history.